Ladies and gentlemen, children of every age denomination, welcome once again to the CryptoManiacs podcast. Actually, we should call this the CryptoManiacs CTT podcast. It's kind of like everything, but the most important question to ask these guys, Task, you know what I'm going to start with? Did you guys get your badge? That's all we want to know. Did you get your badge?
They don't
Dan,
even
do you
know
want to
they
have a go
get a
at this?
badge.
No idea what we're talking
Did I get
about.
a
Right?
Did I get a badge, Matt?
Yeah.
Perfect. Good. Good. Yeah, no, we Archange was on and he gave us little badges on Hive Buzz to give out to people that showed up to we're guests on the podcast. So me and Task were painfully giving them out to everyone because it's a little bit of a process. I made sure that we got them to you guys. That was first and foremost. So, this is your third time here, and you're like gluttons for punishment or something. But you're back, and it's great to have you guys once again for the show. And Task.
But
Task,
I got a question, John.
yes,
Are
sir.
they the CTT guys or the Speak guys? I mean, it's like they originally were the Speak Network guys or the Speak guys. Now they're the CTT guys, and
Well, I put it in my Telegram that it was the Speak Network. I mean, that's what I did. That's but they're
we're going to confuse
multi-branded.
the masses.
That's great. It's exciting. Multi-brands. It's good. Yeah.
It's interesting that. Yeah, I guess at a certain point, once the Speak Network is built and running, we want to start to become known more as the CDT guys,
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at my badge, by the way. I did get it. CryptoManiacs podcast guest.
Good. Thank you, sir. I was a little worried there. I was making sure.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good.
We know what has Dan's attention now. He's just staring at the badge.
I had to go check. Yeah, it's there. I got a lot of cool stuff. The badges are awesome.
There's gonna be a time soon where like everyone can just like auto generate badges of their own free will and just start bombarding Dan with badges, and he'll start losing all of his poker games.
Yeah, these are the NFTs that matter. These are the accolades.
They may not have much monetary value, but they have sentimental value.
Mm-hmm. Social value.
There's probably a song in there somewhere. So, guys, thank you for showing up this week and helping us out here. A lot of interesting stuff going on and a really big show. And you guys are at the core of a lot of it. And, of course, then what you're not at the core of, you have opinions or ideas or maybe some input about. So there's a lot of stuff to cover. One of the things I wanted to start with, and I'll target this to you, Dan, because it appears near and dear to your heart. There's an airdrop that is going on, that is live, I guess, this month. I don't know when the expiration is, but many people can claim now the Ragnarok airdrop. And you guys put out a post about how to do that and set that up with Deluxe. And if you would, for those who aren't aware, maybe if you could give a quick overview of what Ragnarok is, where you got the inspiration for this game, and how you think it's going to benefit Hive and how it ties into Hive. Because I don't know if everybody's clear the correlation between what you're building with the game and how it ties into Hive.
Yeah, Ragnarok is essentially, I want it to be the most competitive game ever built. And I want it to be the fairest game ever built, where you can compete evenly versus everyone else, build your deck, and then be able to earn rewards for the game's entirety, which should last forever. So the idea was to flip the model. A lot of people want mass adoption for their game. They want as many players as possible. But I've noticed a trend of people watching games, and people really like to watch professional players compete. And when you really look around, there's not a game that's really tailors to that. Mostly because this technology is new. With NFTs, you can now introduce scarcity into these games in a way that you couldn't before. So that, just from my background being a poker player, I played chess growing up. I've always been playing competitive games for as long as I can remember. I believe that, the NFT market has brought some of that competitiveness back, but I saw an opportunity to do something that no one else did, which was to sort of create an ownerless game that's community run. And part of that was inspired by Hive. I sort of saw Hive as this, ownerless chain. Everyone owns it, but not one person owns it. No CEO, no company behind it. And I was thinking, this could be sort of the chain where you create all kinds of apps in the same nature, because the distribution is so great. I'm not dropping it to some pre-mined founders or whatnot. I'm dropping it to an actual community. It's just a great experiment in terms of trying to bootstrap a game and a community using the Hive ecosystem, get people skin in the game with the airdrop. There is no company behind it. There is no entity that holds any of the value over the community at all. It's all distributed equally based on your Hive stake. And then the idea was, okay, well, how does this benefit Hive? How can we not only drop it to the community, but now have the community feel a sense of, well, I want this game to succeed because I'm a Hive holder and this benefits Hive. And that's where the sync came in, because of course we could have sold the cards and even, added the Hive to a SIP or a DAO, which was a thought. But I thought to get the barrier to entry as low as possible and to get this distributed as fair as possible, I wanted it to be the zero entry. You just have your Hive and you get your free NFTs. Then from there, we got creative, thinking of perpetual syncs, things like food, potions to heal your characters. After every battle, your characters don't heal, or they're going to heal very, very, very slowly. And you can have potions to speed that up. Food, if you ever played a game, if you run out of food, your stats start to go down, you become weaker. So these are just basically like rent almost. If you're going to play the game, you're going to have to get some potions, get some food. All of this costs HBD, and that HBD is then locked. And what I really saw the opportunity was with the high interest rate, whether it fluctuates from 20 to 10, even down to 5, it's still a sustainable model where you have constant HBD going into this thing and not coming out, and then that interest is paid out every year to the players. So I really wanted this to be in the essence of, hey, we have the tools here to build a big enough HBD pot to make this a professional game, where instead of, reliant on backers, you have this fund that is community owned, and it pays back to the users of the game in a way where it's going to be there next year. And it's not only going to be there next year, there's going to be more. Right? There's not going to be less. So that was sort of the whole spirit of it. I wanted it to be sustainable, but also be a very big sink for HBD, which helps Hive get everyone involved. And now we can really create something where people can become professional gamers and get a scarce deck of cards, compete, carve a niche out, and actually have, income they know is going to be there every year. So that was sort of the inspiration for it.
Very cool. One thing that comes to my mind, and there was talk, and I got this directly from John, who seems to know a lot more about Splinterlands than I do. But one of the proposed ideas we've heard from Splinterlands is one of the use cases for SPS is if you're not a player in the game, you can basically, bootstrap your SPS to a player as a way of maybe, getting some of the rewards from that player. Do you envision anything like that? If I'm not a Ragnarok player, I'm not a gamer, but I want to be involved in a certain way. Is there a way I can, for example, bet on Matt or support Matt and say, okay, I'm going to buy some in-game tokens and I'm going to bet on Matt because I think Matt's just awesome at this. And then whatever he earns, there could be some type of pool that's distributed. Did you consider something like that?
Yeah. One of the main reasons to build this in the way I did was because I wanted there to be large side betting. And, side betting has a lot of laws that you have to deal with. But if you're not dealing with a company, if you're dealing with an open protocol with no door to attack, then you can have betting. And it's sort of like a just deal with it type of moment. They can't knock on my door and stop it. So the idea is, first of all, yes, you'll be able to rent the cards out. You'll be able to rent the cards out and earn what they earn, which is EXP coin or their yearly reward. So you'll be able to have that parameter. So you can basically lend it out and say, hey, we're going to split rewards, or hey, I'm just going to rent it to you and you keep all of your rewards, but you have to pay me X. Similar to how Splinterlands has their rental market. The currency in the game is going to be EXP coin. So there's two currencies in the game: HBD, which is needed to buy in-game items, and then EXP coin, which is used to power up your cards. So all the cards start with 0 stats, or level 1. And in order to max them out, you actually need to earn this EXP coin. There's nowhere you can buy it. Everyone starts at 0. When the game launches, everyone's going to be, I guess, frantically battling to try to get the first EXP coins, the first level up the cards and see what the new abilities are and all of that. So I envision EXP coins going to be pretty valuable, at least for people who want to save time. So that would be the way. If you want to get involved, you could rent it out, or you could give it to the person, lend it to the person, and there'll be a reward cut, like a reward share. Those would be the two immediate. But of course, the community comes up with any great ideas. Always willing to add more features.
Now you mentioned this betting that you envision a game where there's a lot of side betting going on. Is that something you're building into the platform, or will that be a second layer or a side development by whoever develops those type of markets?
No, it's going to be built into the actual protocol. It's going to be very similar to poker, where if you go to a poker site, you can bet on a player, you can stake a player for higher competitions. In this way, you would be basically lending them a deck, almost being like their sponsor. But yeah, there's going to be, you can put up the action saying, hey, I want X amount. I think Matt's going to beat Dan. And then somebody could take up that action and it'll go into a multi-sig account. And then there'll be small fees taken from that, put back into the game. So that'd be another HBD sync. All of it will be done through HBD, all the betting. And that's pretty much how I envision it.
Excellent. John, you got any questions surrounding Ragnarok?
Yeah, something, Dan, you mentioned when you started describing Ragnarok is how people love viewing games. And, you just need to look at something like Twitch to see the market for people just literally obsessed with watching other people. How do you look at that with your game? Like how is this going to be something that someone will want to? Yes, like you put the side betting to it, and that's cool. But what are some of the things you think that will make this something that people want to watch and pay attention to?
Yeah, that would be the competitiveness of it. What people really like is a game where you can flaunt your skills. One of the reasons Fortnite was so popular because people could build those walls, and it's almost mesmerizing watching them click the button so fast. It's like, wow, how are they so skilled? It's the same format. Why do people watch poker? Right. People don't watch chess as much, but chess it sort of came up before the gambling era. But anytime you put a lot of money on something and there's a high amount of skill involved, you're going to have people that want to watch. So I always go into explaining the battle mechanics, and I sound crazy because, combining chess, poker, and I guess a Hearthstone Splinterland-esque type game all into one sounds very confusing, but it actually flows all into one movement. The fighting is actual poker. And what I envision is people watching exciting matches that have very close outcomes, and there'll be lots of money being bet against them. And then also in this scenario, I'm saying, and then you have a scarce deck of cards where not everyone can get in. So I can envision it being like wow, that's an expensive deck. There's sort of a barrier to entry for normal people just because of the cost to get in. Right. And then as you start to get towards the end of the year, fighting for that top 100 is going to be, because keep in mind, people can bet futures, right? Oh, I think this player is going to enter the top 100, and I'll give 5 to 1 or 10 to 1 or whatever.
Nice.
So yeah, I would envision as the countdown to the end of the year happens, people are fighting to get into that top 100 for mega prizes. It's a very poker feeling, right? You either get in the money or you bust. So being 101 is not fun. So I envision those last months of the year being pretty intense. And yeah.
Nice.
Sorry, Dan. Matt's screwing around here, and he's amusing himself and me, evidently. He just threw me off course. Dan, is this a game for a novice? I mean, and I understand what you're saying when you explain the dynamics without people seeing it, without screenshots. It's very difficult. But is this something that somebody who is not a traditional gamer can come in, or is this really something that you better have, years of experience in gaming? And if you don't, well, you better look for other ways to get involved.
You're going to need to be a serious gamer. It's not really for someone who you're not going to get the most out of your cards if you're not playing them. This isn't a game where you want to go and I'll play once a month. If you're not really grinding, you should be putting your cards to work and renting them out, because there's a scarce amount and they should be in high demand if the game is in high demand. Of course, any new player could come and they could learn. As long as you have a passion for competitive games, chess, poker. I don't know if you've played something like Hearts. So Splinterlands, obviously. These are all, very competitive, and they all have their own luck factors and skill factors mixed in. So, it's definitely not for I'm going to just play once a month. It's definitely geared to the very hardcore grindy type. But that doesn't mean you can't, what I envision, if you're a casual player and you have an expensive deck, you might rent it out most of the month. And then you might keep it for a week where you play around and try not to mess up your record too badly.
Okay, John. If you would maybe search the comment section for questions about Ragnarok, because we're going to move on to something else in a sec here. So if there's any questions, we'll take them while we're on topic. But one other question I had with this, Dan. Please explain what a ducat, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, a ducat is, and what we do with them. We're getting them on our airdrops. I mean, you go in, you follow the instructions, you claim these rewards. What do we do with these when we get them? How's this unfolding? What do these all mean?
Yeah, so the duat, the reason we did this was it was just better technologically wise. Instead of converting the RCTs into the actual NFT, you're going to convert the duat into an RCT, which is the NFT. It just isn't revealed yet. Once you reveal it, then you get your NFT. So that was the only change. The duats are basically liquid or fungible NFT tokens. You need 112 to claim one. We did this also because there were some users who didn't have 112 Hive. Well, this solved that, because if you have 50 Hive, you get 50 duat tokens. But yeah, that's basically what it is. You have 112, you get one NFT. There's 3.3 million NFTs total. There'll be no more than that ever created. So yeah.
And I lied. I have another question. These NFTs, in some games, you can combine them to make them more powerful, which of course naturally reduces the amount outstanding. But the new creation is a more powerful feature in the game, or has more powerful features and attributes. Is that also part of this game, where we'll be able to combine NFTs? If I have, I don't know, two swords, I can combine them to make a super sword or something?
No, we'll be able to do that with certain items. The NFTs are fixed, and the only way to level them is the actual EXP token. So instead of combining, we went with the fungible token route.
Okay, gotcha. John, you got any questions, or any questions from the?
No, I'm really excited to see this, because ever since I kind of had this aha moment with Splinterlands, it's kind of changed how I approach things, and This is obviously, like you said, Dan, it's brand new technology. This is brand new, and but just to like gaming as a whole is just this massive behemoth, and you combine that with the NFT stuff, the crypto stuff, the live streaming stuff. Now you put the side betting on top of it. I mean, just to see this thing be launched is going to be amazing, because I think it hits so many different passionate groups of people all at once. So I mean, when? I guess that's the question. When? Soon?
You have an outline of a timeline, maybe, Dan?
So it's going to be in phases. The next phase to look out for would be the actual NFTs themselves, so which you'll claim. You'll see the stats on the cards. You can start building your decks. We're looking at a couple of months, but it could be longer. The game, I'm just saying, will be in a public test this year. So by the end of this year, we should have a solid, stable public test where people can input their NFTs, play around, start earning some rewards, but they're not a part of the actual main game. After that, it's actually up to the community to put a vote when they think the game is ready to be launched. So I can only actually promise a public test net, and then after that, it'll be up to the NFT holders to actually launch the game via vote.
Nice. So this is truly decentralized. Like, you know what? That's the buzz term, right? Everyone loves to throw it around, but this is truly going to be the community's game. It's not going to be a company owning it, saying how this thing goes. So
yeah, who am I to say the game is ready? When the community says, "Yeah, we have all the features we want. This is the way," then we pull the trigger. So
nice, dude. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, but then again, I'm a complete degen when it comes to these type of games. So yeah. And I'm trying to get Task into it. It's slow but steady to get him excited for.
Hey man, you got to remember. I remember when Pong came out. So. A little white dot going back and forth. That's my starting point with games, and I ended with Atari in the 1980s. So I'm a little rusty. Anyway, Matt, I'm listening to this, and I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it sounds like some of this, the infrastructure might be able to utilize the Speak network. And that's another project you guys have been involved in and talking about. And you said something on one of the most recent episodes. I don't remember was the past one or a couple back of CTT, but you framed it in a way that I had never heard it said before, but I found it real interesting. You said basically what you guys are doing is trying to incentivize decentralized node structures or something to that effect. Could you elaborate on that? And maybe for those who aren't aware, maybe newcomers to Hive, what is Speak Network? What's your vision with that? And where did that the idea of it come from for you guys?
Yeah. Well, first, before I answer that, I just want to say just one more thing on the Ragnarok thing that I think is similar to Speak Network, and it comes from the same philosophy. Is that this thing of note here, with all the other things that you guys said, which are amazing items that are going to happen in the Ragnarok game, the really cool thing here, I think that's going to be notable in the future that people are going to refer back to, is this is the first game where the community owns the game outright. There is no centralized builder, there's no centralized owner, there's no IP company that's taking the IP profits or anything. All the profits go back into the game saving account and back to the users of the game. And the users of the game, well, not even the users, it's the NFT owners that will get the profits. So getting hold of those NFTs is effectively getting hold of a portion of the ownership of the game, And this is the type of thinking that blockchain and Web3 is starting to bring about. So it's a completely different business model even to normal gaming. And I think this will be the line in the sun where people look back and go, oh shit, this is what changed, It's the same principle with the Speak Network again. It's like whoever the owners of the Speak Network will be the people providing the value to the network. And within the Speak Network, it's the people providing the infrastructure. They're the people who are going to keep Web3 decentralized and available for everyone as a human right rather than through centralized companies. So the Speak Network is simply a group of people, anyone who wants to get involved, running nodes that allow people to post social media, and then those nodes are rewarded from the protocol. And the protocol has a way of measuring the different work you're doing to contribute. And then you get rewarded by the protocol autonomously based on the work that you do in terms of providing decentralized node infrastructure, peer-to-peer. And that's it. But it sounds kind of complicated, but we make it so that anyone can run these nodes. You know, it's not going to be that complicated to run nodes, and it's not going to be very expensive at all. It'll just basically take all the power away from all that run their infrastructure centralized, and therefore are able to control your accounts and control your media and your posting capabilities. The idea for it came up when Dan and I started 3 years ago, nearly pretty much, I think, running 3 Speak, and we devs and try and work out.
And he left.
I'll pick up where he was leaving off.
Thanks, Dan.
So yeah, we started 3 Speak. We realized that the infrastructure was centralized. We went about looking at things like Filecoin and a plethora of other things out there. And the more we looked, the more we started to understand Web3, and the more that we started to understand the need for incentives. So there's that. So yeah, I mean, the whole goal here is a lot of people think you're going to bring your own node and run that, and everyone's going to be decentralized. Everything's going to be fine. It's the same philosophy with the Lightning Network. It's the same philosophy with 99.9. I call it the unincentivized bring your own node package. It's a very easy duct tape slap over a crack type fix, but it is not a long-term sustainable solution, because that always ends up in the hands of the billionaires. They're the people who have the resources and capability to actually run this infrastructure. You need to be able to incentivize infrastructure on the micropayment level. And that is one thing that Hive is light years ahead of when it comes to capability versus things like Ethereum, who are still trying to find a layer 2 transaction or a layer 2 transaction layer. They don't even have their transactions for micropayments. And if you don't have micropayments, you can't have an incentive layer. You can't have an incentive layer if it costs $5, $10 to send a transaction. You can't have an incentive layer if it's centralized. So that was the challenge, to actually create a decentralized, censorship-resistant micropayment incentive layer so everyone, big and small, can participate. And Matt, just jump in anytime you're good. I'm just going over the basics of the incentive layer. That's the whole goal of the Speak Network. We saw the issue. If you look at Ethereum, you look at the centralized infrastructure that is propping everything up. The same with most chains out there. And I don't say this as an attack. I say this as an observer. I say this as a concerned witness. I'm not trying to, Hive is the end all be all. I'm just saying that Hive actually has the capability to incentivize micropayments. And that's why we're leveraging Hive to build a layer 2 to then use the tentacles to incentivize CDN nodes, storage nodes, nodes of all kinds. That's just the first start. And then the idea is, hey, we can literally have community run infrastructure. And the big end goal I see one day is you have a tokenized community and it's prestigious and you want to be a part of it. Well, in order to be a part of it, you have to be storing at least X% or a very small percentage of that community's data, whether it's videos, images, who knows, right? But in order to be on, you actually have to open up your hard drive and be a part of it and share. And then you'll get an NFT, a badge. Say, hey, look, this person contributes. Look at how much they contribute. Oh, Johnny over here, look how much he's contributing. This guy is really helping the ecosystem. He's awesome. Everyone likes Johnny. And now you have this positive feedback system where it's like, hey, yeah, I want to be an infrastructure provider. I'm earning social capital. I'm earning tokens. I'm a part of this community. And we're all doing it together. We're not relying on Google or OpenSea or Infra or any of these centralized entities. We are the entity. And if you attack one of us, it's like chopping off a piece of a blob. It just grows back and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's sort of the end goal. But the basic is the micropayments to these node systems. The end goal is giving tools to these communities to effectively encapsulate the social value of contribution. Because at the end of the day, it's not soulless. If you're storing some of your favorite content creators' data and you're providing them value, you want the world to see that, but you don't want to go around telling everybody because that's not cool. But if you just had a little badge on your sleeve that you couldn't help, it just appears there, right? I'm cool. I'm on CryptoManiacs podcast. I didn't have to ask for that badge, but people go to my profile, they can see it. It's like, oh, that's cool. I don't have to go telling everybody I'm on the CryptoManiacs podcast before. They can just go see it on my profile. It's the same concept here. And that's how I think we get around the incentive layer and defeat all of these centralized infrastructure providers.
There's one thing you've spoken about in your videos on CTT broadcasts. You've written about it over the years, and this is the idea of venture capital money. And anybody who follows venture capitalists and technology knows that ultimately you get a conflict between the venture capitalists and the users, because at some point the VCs want to be paid. Now, one of the things that you guys have gone out and done is you went and submitted a proposal to the Decentralized Hive Fund, and you were funded from that proposal, or the proposal was funded. So now you can make the case that not only are you developing a infrastructure system that is decentralized, this was not put together by VC money. And either Matt or Dan, Matt, if you're back, would you comment how important that was to the overall vision that you guys are trying to bring, and the overall example that you're trying to bring, that, you know what, we can do this stuff if we plan on it. You know, we're not taking a founder stake. In fact, we're not even funding it. We're not looking for VC money. We're going to a decentralized community and having their fund it. How important is that for the overall vision of your goals here?
You back, Matt, or are you frozen? He's like Stone Cold statue. To not have VC money is absolutely pivotal. The reason being is this isn't an investment. That's the thing. You can make money off of it and you can treat it as an investment, but it's not. This is a new way of doing things. This is a way of actually not having to rely on venture capitalists. And the more you study and realize it, the more you realize, well, you can't have it with venture capitalists. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to give you $1 billion, go create a DAO. You can't do it. It's the one thing in life that really you can't replicate with money. Money actually hurts it. Because the whole point of Web3 was being sustainable, having a fund raised by the community. That's what all, if you look at the DEXs, you look at all these DAOs, and you look at all these ways, all the brightest minds from Dan Larimer to Vitalik, they're all trying to solve this community funding. How do we become self-reliant? Because ultimately, if you rely on a venture capitalist, they are God. Because when they leave, everything crumbles because the community was not strong enough to support the infrastructure. They weren't strong enough to absorb the exit liquidity. Or they, the pre-mine gets in the hands of government officials and it becomes PayPal 2.0, a bank 2.0 sort of scheme. But it's not Web3 anymore. Now, whether those are going to be good investments or not, I'm not sure. Maybe they are. I found that something that's going to actually be that Bitcoin, but for Web3. Because Bitcoin's great, store value. Okay, cool. It's like a pet rock that's very valuable, right? It got its one trick pony, which means it's amazing because it got deemed store value, which is like a godsend, right? Because you really don't have to do anything after that. It's like, oh, store value, you just buy it and hodl it, and that's what it does. It's like, okay, cool. But you're not building apps on top of Bitcoin. Lightning Network has proven that you can't do this, and it's not desirable. So we needed that non-VC funded project, Hive being the first base layer, the layer 2 should follow, because it really doesn't make much sense to have the censorship resistant base layer then to build centralized points of failure on top of that. It makes sense for a lot of things if you have a business and all that, and that's perfectly fine. But if you actually want to extend the censorship resistant properties of Hive, you can't have a VC there. The VC is going to want to collect. The VC is going to have power over the ecosystem. And it's this chicken and an egg that Vitalik always talks about. Well, how do you get the technology built if you don't have a VC? You know, who's going to pay the developers? And I believe that's why it's sort of, I always looked at Hive as like this fire out of nothing. And it's like, we must protect it at all costs, because with this fire, we can grow it. It's much easier to grow a fire that exists than to start one from nothing. And what I mean by that is we were able to tap into a DAO via a community on Hive without having to go to venture capitalists. We had that fire. We just need to stick a stick in it. And now we are a part of this ecosystem, right? That fire had to exist, though, and that was the community fork, everything that happened with Justin Sun, but that was what poofed it. So we're in this very rare circumstance where we actually have access to funding via the community, which is rare. It just isn't out there in a true sense. Because normally you're getting it from some pre-mine venture capitalist fund, which is them paying you, not a community. And eventually they're going to want their money back. And 10x later, they're going to dump on you and leave. So, you know, it's absolutely critical to prove that you could pick yourself up by your own bootstraps and be sustainable, or this all for nothing.
Yeah, I view it's a slower route, because obviously things can be shortcut if somebody's coming in with, you know, 35, 50, $100 million or whatever these VCs are throwing around. And the last number I read is there's been about 35 billion in VC money that's come into, you know, the crypto realm and all of that. So you're going to have a lot of applications out there that get built out. But as you just said, there's that big elephant in the room at some point in time that they're going to say, we want our money. And if I'm not mistaken, just watching what you and Matt have done with the different projects, it's like, Dan, you have to go into it from the start with this mindset. And Crypto Mom, Hester Pierce, has said, she proposed at the SEC, well, why don't we give like a 3-year window where entities can decentralize? And, you know, it certainly is a valid proposal. The challenge I see is it's not very realistic. If anything, over time, you know, something that starts centralized is only going to get more centralized over the 3 or 5 years. It's and maybe I'm mistaken, but I'd like your opinion. That is this something you have to go in with the mindset that we're going to decentralize from the get-go, or else it's done?
Okay, everything they say starts out quote unquote centralized. There's a birth, but it's where you let it go. Do you let it go on a decentralized path or a centralized path? Because there is a first step, and that first step makes all the difference. And I equate it to this. That's like saying, okay, we're gonna take a baby tiger that doesn't know anything. We're gonna raise it in a zoo so it can be ready for the wild. That's what you're saying if you're saying, hey, I'm going to decentralize later. It's like, well, no, you're not. You won't survive. First of all, power corrupts. And if you have any kind of power over a giant network, you've become Frodo with that ring on the mountain, right? It becomes very difficult to let it go. Secondly, how do you do it? You know, that's the thing that it can be very frustrating because people don't understand what decentralization means, what the road to censorship resistant. You can't just snap your fingers and say, I promise you I'm going to decentralize. That's a lie. No one can say that. Just as I can't say, I promise Hive will be decentralized in 10 years. Or I promise Bitcoin will be decentralized in 10 years. This is something that is constantly being fought for and curated and culminated and taken care of and nurtured. And it can change on a whim at any time. It's the most difficult thing in the world to do because you can't buy it. You can't snap your fingers into, you can't just say, okay, community, you're going to be decentralized. I'm forcing you to be. It's like, well, then it's centralized. You can't do that. It has to be voluntary. It has to come of its own. So it's incredibly naive. I know the heart's in the right place, but to say, oh, we'll give them 3 years to decentralize as if it's some light switch you flip on, Like you can parameter censorship resistance and decentralization within the code, but you can't guarantee it and you can't enforce it. I believe there's only 2 decentralized platforms out there: Bitcoin, which is relatively useless in Web3 outside of being very valuable, a store of value. That's very important, obviously, but in terms of apps. And then you have Hive. Outside of that, you have to watch and wait and see what comes out. And the hardest part is they're not the ones advertising. They're not the ones you're going to actually see in front of your face. You have to dig and study and research. And a lot of these things that haven't had a critical test, you can say, oh, well, the distribution looks good and they don't have any VC funding, and they parametered it so where exchanges can't be validators. They're doing everything right, but they haven't been attacked. What would happen if they got attacked? Is the community really strong enough? We don't know. There's a lot of unknowns out there when it comes to, is it actually censorship resistant? So, yeah, I just kind of have to laugh when I hear that. Yeah, you'll decentralize in 3, like you're baking a cake, right? Yeah, you just put it in, you put the ingredients, put it in the oven, and it's done. The bell rings, and boom, you got your product. It's as easy as that. So, yeah.
Well, you mentioned something on one of the CTTs that I found very interesting in framing the entire conversation in a different way. And it's one thing to stand up to the Facebooks of the world and Twitters and go around that and set up decentralized social media and things of that nature. But I believe it was Cardano you were talking about and Hodgkinson, and you made the comment, let's see him stand up to the fire when all of a sudden one of the alphabet agencies from the U.S. government knocks on its door because Russians are using his network to avoid sanctions. And that's a real eye opener, because when you start talking about censorship resistant, effectively, you're also talking about financially controlling resistance, if you will. I mean, we talk about freedom of speech, but there's also freedom of money, freedom of capital. And how does a Hodgkinson stand up to that if all of a sudden the FBI or Homeland Security or somebody comes knocking on his door and says, listen, this Cardano network that you have running, in this software that you wrote, that we have sanctions and it's being used to evade them. That's a lot of heat that you better be decentralized if you want to avoid going away in handcuffs.
Yeah, I mean, if it can be attacked, it will be attacked. These networks aren't big enough. They're not taken seriously enough to actually be points of failure yet. But as crypto grows and as fiat becomes more and more like toilet paper, except for a basket, most countries are not going to have national fiats of their own anymore. They're going to latch on either to the dollar or whatever. Take your side, West versus East, and then you're going to have Bitcoin and neutral currencies. And what I really do see is you're going to have countries come out and say, "Hey, we're backing Cardano. We're adding that to the reserve. We're going to add some Solana, right?" And these countries don't know any better. They have no fucking idea what's going on. But what that's going to do is put these cryptos on the world stage as mass liquidity. Now they're taken seriously. Now they're going to be dissected. And who is using your network? What are they using it for? That's when this is no longer a game. These people, we live in the wild, wild west. The music eventually stops. And this whole game is about control. And they control everything. We're just trying to be that counterbalance to create a little bit of something where it's like, hey, there's no centralized point of failure here. But these founders are in for a very, very rude awakening. And it's a nightmare because they started it and they can't stop it. They can't say, okay, I want to decentralize now. I want to dump my coin. I want to decentralize, right? You can't do that. So you sort of have to, with life, if you want something, you have to sort of take what comes with it. They wanted the fame. They wanted the money. They wanted the notoriety. All right, now you have to take having a payment network that you can't censor. If you do, it destroys the value of everything you have. If you don't, you might end up in handcuffs. So you have some very, very horrible options coming up if you are a centralized point of failure on a value transfer. I mean, imagine this. These aren't Chuck E. Cheese tokens. These people are moving money across your network. Terrorist, illegal. Like, if that starts to happen in a big way, how are you going to stand up to the heat? You think the Justin Sun attack was something? These governments will make that look like child's play.
Something you Matt actually mentioned, and you kind of went over it, but I want to kind of switch it up a little bit and get your opinion on this, because this is obviously the buzzword in crypto, and Matt mentioned true Web3. True Web3, because we hear that term thrown around all the time. I mean, it's the buzzword. It's with all the Elon Musk and the Twitter stuff, with Jack from Twitter is talking about, like, this seems to be the thing. Web3, Web3, Web3. I've seen the example you said where literally the VC has gone and the platforms have crashed. I've seen this not only in the crypto space, but also traditional social media. If you could sum it up, what would be your definition of true Web3, and how close, obviously we're all fanboys of Hive, but how close do you think that Hive is the true solution for this compared to what everyone else is talking about out there?
Yeah, true Web3, Hive would be a very good example. Of course, there's no perfect solution. You can always become more censorship resistant. However, the whole goal here is to, not rely on centralized funding. That's absolutely key. I have a weird quorum. I say as long as you don't have a entity that holds custodial funds as a validator on your chain, that's Web3. That's more of a technological parameter. It's not so much of a community thing, but it's something you absolutely have to have. So as long as you're not relying on centralized funding, you have community-run validators, and you have a good token distribution, not just now, but going into the future. That's why Proof of Brain is really good. You have the DAO to sort of offset the witness pay. People can accumulate tokens and not have to, be a technological infrastructure provider. I've always thought that was a great thing for Proof of Brain. So those are the really the three things that you really have to worry about, because, I don't believe Web3 is on proof of work. Of course, you have Bitcoin. I don't think proof of work really aligns. I think coin voting is sort of the pill you have to swallow, and you have to parameter it as much as possible. What are parameters? The 3-month lockup, the 1-month delay in governance voting. This is taking coin voting and forcing parameters to make it more censorship resistant, because without those parameters, it's centralized. It's going to lead to centralization every time. Proof of stake, plain Jane proof of stake is probably the worst consensus mechanism on earth. It leads to centralization every single time. Right. But as you start to get coin voting with parameters, I think that is, so I guess it's not really a sexy answer, but those would be the three. If you have those going for you, no VC funding, community run validators, good token distribution on a coin voting system, you have some censorship resistance there. And that at the end of the day, censorship resistance is, I guess that could have saved a lot of time. Censorship resistance is Web3. If you're censorship resistant, you can be sustainable, then you are Web3.
Yeah, to me, I think, and it extends on the point that you're talking about, Dan. I think it very simply, to me, starts with the data. Is the data distributed? Is it decentralized? And on Hive, you can get into the argument, is it enough nodes? Is it too many nodes? I mean, that's a different debate. But there is no doubt there's over 100 different nodes, witness nodes, that all have the data on these different computers, and they're spread all over the world. So there is no centralized database that is controlled by a Facebook, a Twitter, a Google. It's controlled by, you have this, you guys have a witness node, John and CTP have a witness node, Leo Finance has a witness node, Block Trades, and it all has the same data, but it's all controlled by different entities. So to me, that is a pillar in the Web3, is where is this data being stored in and who has it? And, just tokenizing a Web2 application, and I think you were saying that in a roundabout way, tokenizing a Web2 application doesn't make it Web3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. That's one of the first questions you want to ask is about the token distribution, where the data is being stored, how it's being stored. Hive, it's incentivized via the inflation. So we know that, someone's going to be there to store that data being voted in. A lot of people actually don't store the text on chain. So there's a big problem there. That's where you get into the layer 2 applications, which I think is a very terrible idea. I think text is the most important thing that has to be on a layer 1. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's who's holding the data. As long as that's distributed and there's no door you can knock on to take it down, that would be Web3.
And this leads into something interesting. And again, as I said before, you guys have talked a lot about censorship resistance in line with the freedom of speech. And, now we obviously have this issue being pushed forth by Elon Musk, who I think we all agree, no matter, even if his intentions are noble, which who knows if they are, that isn't the solution. It's still under the thumb of a company. But when we look at the financial aspect of things, and since you guys were on the last time, and by the way, to everybody who's listening, we lost Matt. Evidently, he's had internet connection, so Matt kind of just disappeared. But Hive-backed dollar is really becoming very interesting. You mentioned it as it's going to be the payment token for Ragnarok. We see stable coins getting a lot of attention on a good note because of their value and the ability that they have to provide payment services and resources that are needed. On the bad side is obviously regulations and the bureaucrats and politicians and governments and everybody else is stepping up and opining about them. And looking at the Hive-backed dollar, which is built on the Hive blockchain, we have in my opinion, we have a token that they can regulate all they want. This really means nothing to it because it's like, okay, how are you going to stop it? Do you see that the same way as I do, or is there something maybe that perhaps I'm missing?
No, I think there's another hat trick that Hive got right with the algo stablecoin backed by essentially air. Yeah, it's Hive, but it's not connected to anything in the physical realm. It has no jurisdiction. That's why fiat, it might be a digit in a number, or it might be a digit in a computer, but it still has ties to the physical realm, and they can control that, and they will control that. So, yeah, I think every community needs some form of a stable payment mechanism within. Hive goes up and down, but what's the point of having fast feeless payments if you have to worry about volatility? That takes away the feeless, because you might be paying a bigger fee than you really wanted to. So it's absolutely critical to have a stable form of payment here. I'm not a fan of every ecosystem creating their own. I think Hive had to, simply because there was nothing else out there. I still believe that to this day. There isn't another algo coin like Hive that is truly censorship resistant. It needs a little bit more liquidity, but we had the hard part. The hardest part was actually getting it born and being censorship resistant and not having the VC funding. A little bit more liquidity, and you have a very, very powerful force. And what this happens is, now you can start creating jobs and economies under Hive where people can pay workers and people can start creating businesses. Things you couldn't do if HBD didn't exist, because you'd have to rely on DAI or some other centralized coin that inevitably is going to need KYC and all of that jazz. So I think, I think it's really, really good to have HBD, fast feeless. It's still a novel in the entire ecosystem. It's just been overlooked.
If we can tangent, maybe for those listening who don't know, because I believe you researched it, and if you didn't, that's fine. But could you do a quick comparison between HBD, Hive-backed dollar, and UST? Because UST obviously is the algo that's getting a lot of publicity, and it obviously shot up on Luna. And what is the difference, and what do you think the advantages to HBD are over UST?
Yeah, UST was born from a pre-mined token called Luna, VC backed. They have a treasury offering offering APR if you hold UST that comes out of a centralized fund. So if you heard, I've already said centralized a couple of times. That's going to be the biggest failure. It's good if they get in cahoots with some government and they become a payment mechanism, and they have a lot of liquidity, so they can offer some of these APRs, and that's fine if that's what the route you want to go. But Hive's really, it's trying to act like gold, but in the virtual realm. Like, you have gold, it's yours. It's not, it's not like owned by someone. It's God created, right? It's the same thing. Like, when you have HBD out there, it's like, well, if you can KYC with it if you want, or you don't have to, but you might get in trouble if you don't. HBD doesn't get in trouble. It doesn't care. HBD is a thing. It just exists. You can use it or you don't use it. That's not what UST is. UST is going to come with certain stipulations. It's banking 2.0, what UST is. So yeah, I really like what they're doing in terms of bringing publicity to the algo stable market, because a lot of people thought, they shied away from it. They're like, oh no, it has to be backed by fiat or it's not a real stable coin. So the one thing they did was they kind of opened everyone's eyes and saying, hey, maybe we can get creative here, and we actually don't have to back it with fiat. You can actually back it by an underlying asset that's digital. And so yeah, we're starting to see a bastardized form of algo stable coins out there. I think it's going to serve Hive well when people come around and research, oh, wow, they actually have a serious algo stable coin here. And that's going to be the emphasis in a few years. People are going to start to understand pre-mine and what's controllable and what not. And I believe that's where Hive's really going to stand out when people do their research.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this leads into what I wanted to ask you. And forgive me, I forget I think the name of your guest on the last CTT was Raul. But you had a show last Thursday about No Limit Coin. Mm-hmm. And obviously, this is another thing that I guess is right up your alley, being a poker player. So I imagine you have a little bit of familiarity with online gaming platforms and some of the struggles that they've gone through, as you've stated on a number of occasions, due to your profession of gaming. You picked up and left the United States after they became a little onerous to your ability to earn a living. And one of the things that was very interesting, and too bad Matt's not here because I give him kudos. He did a wonderful job, a wonderful sales job during that show. One of the things the CEO said is that he is now going to, because of the fast and feeless nature of HBD, because of the distributed or decentralized nature of HBD. Obviously, you're well aware in the gaming realm, regulatory points of vulnerability are a serious issue. Even though it's legal, banking tends to avoid it. So what is No Limit Coin? And the fact that the CEO said that he's looking at, it won't be the only stable coin on the platform, but that's what he's going to kind of push in the future because he kind of saw the benefits of that. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about No Limit Coin and what the gaming industry faces and why HBD is a good solution for them.
Yeah, the gaming industry is very ripe for Web3. The payment processors all take way too much. It's very difficult to get into certain countries just because of how do you deposit. A lot of countries don't accept Visa. There's all kinds of red tape. So, what they saw there over No Limit Coin was a way to bring gambling into Web3 using tokens. And instead of, going the route of trying to create their own stable coin, they're saying, hey, we're just going to have NLC power on the background. NLC is their native token for their ecosystem. And then we're going to use stables, to gamble because people want to get, they want to play poker, they want to place bets, they want to use stable coins, and that's good. One of the things that's going to the sales pitch, it sold itself, right? You said, oh, wow, they're offering 20%. It's fast, feeless. You might have to pay fees with the US DAI or, USDT. All of these other stable coins, they either come with fees or they're centralized, and he's going to run into some kind of legality issues down the road. Whereas, you don't have to worry about Bitcoin. If you're accepting Bitcoin there, not a big deal. You don't have to worry about, what's the SEC going to do? Is Bitcoin going to go down? Is it going to be some kind of scandal? As you have to do with these pre-mines, right? They could blow up. It could really hurt your customer base if they're holding some of this token because of you, and ends up being some kind of legal issue. So I think just the fact that fast and feeless cannot be understated. Like that's always been a goal. That's one of the things that Ethereum's been forked a million times so they can make the fees lower. Having lower traffic that's not necessarily a cure-all, obviously. Hive has been having a high traffic, yet keeping the feeless nature. So I see more and more of these big gambling or any institution wanting to hold HBD, giving you that native 20%, being fast and feeless, having the named wallets. That all goes a very long way for ease of access, especially when you're talking mass adoption. People have their own named account. It's like a little bank account that they have, and they don't have to remember these long strings. I'm just going to send it to my friend. I know their username. It's very easy. So yeah, I think No Limit Coin is just one of the many that can keep signing up and getting HBD into their ecosystems. This is one of the Trojan horses for HBD to become liquid, is to get merchants accepting it, offering that high interest that we're giving, and taking advantage of that for their customers. Maybe they take a small cut, but either way, that's what UST did. They're actually going to have to keep gradually lowering it because they're doing it in a centralized way. We're going to lower it as it gets bigger just to become sustainable. But right now, it's a really golden opportunity still because people haven't solved that payment mechanism like Hive has. So I see more people like No Limit Coin stepping up, and why not?
Well, and this brings up a major point, and you've said it a number of times, payment. And what happens, I think, in our discussions on Hive about this, and here's my quick question to you. Of all those HBD that ends up on No Limit Coin, how many of them do you think will be used to be converted to Hive?
I would say very little, because they
Zero,
probably want to keep it. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
who's going to know that? And see, this is, I think, the problem with the discussion that I run into. People are always saying the vulnerability of having this HBD, it could be converted to Hive. And that is true. But if you start making a payment system and all of a sudden No Limit Coin has 1 million HBD on it, yes, it's freely floating. Yes, it potentially could be moved and converted to Hive. But that's like saying the US dollar, all of it's going to be just put into a bank account, a savings account, and earn 0.05% a year. People use US dollars for many, many different things. And when you start getting these payment systems and merchants start taking it and platforms start integrating it, then the idea of, well, we just take our HBD, we put it in savings, we earn 20%. That gets diluted because there's people who are saying, we're actually using this. And then you went the extra step of saying, now we can develop economy, because you start to pay your developers, you start to pay your hosting costs, you start to pay your gardener, you start to pay all these different things. Maybe you don't get into the physical world, but you certainly could if it got big enough. And that's where you really have the change for HBD. Yeah,
I mean, merchants are going to have to keep a pool. And I wouldn't be, once it becomes super liquid, I wouldn't, if I'm a merchant, I have a basket full of stable coins and I have one yielding 20 and the rest aren't yielding shit. I'd probably convert all my stables to HBD and just pay out those and convert it back as people wanted to cash out the other stables, because why wouldn't I be harvesting it with 20% interest or even 10, 15% interest? So I think that is one of the really strong use cases here. And more merchants that accept it, the more that's just going to be hoarded. Sort of like Tether, right? Tether people knew they couldn't redeem it, but they still hodled it because they needed a stable. They needed something to keep their bank account stable. It's the same thing here. People are going to hold HBD because there's always going to be risk-off people. You just have to have those risk-off people willing to hold your coin. And once they do, they hold it forever because it's risk-off. It's like money to them. They say, okay, yeah, I'm always going to have 30% of my portfolio and risk-off. And then if you get enough of those people, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. This becomes, yeah.
People don't realize how much bigger the fixed income market is globally as opposed to equities. And very few people, not very few, but the majority of the money out there is not spec money. It is risk off, it's long-term built, it's bonds, it's things of that nature of give me the yield. And what's interesting about this, just going back to No Limit Coin, after listening to your show last week and giving some thinking about it, and I actually wrote an article about this. Here's the situation. I mean, obviously, it's going to depend on how the platform sets it up and how they accept the token and how the HBD is integrated into their platform from a technical side. But you've mentioned a number of times the 20% return. Well, this is where innovation comes in, because what they could do is, like you said, they could take a cut. And why would a player want to accept, let's say, 17% return when they could just stake it on Hive for 20%? Well, let's say, for example, No Limit Coin decides to pay out 22%. Well, how do they do that? Well, they pay out 17% in HBD, and then they pay out 5% in their No Limit Coin. So they're actually using some of their coin to give a better return than one would actually get on Hive. Or you could build in, and I don't know the gaming world, but let's say you have advanced subscriptions or you get more features. So you get a 17% ROI instead of 20, and the platform takes 3%, but they make up for that 3% because they give you, additional gambling rights, or they give you access to an area that most people don't get into, or they allow you to raise your limit 25%, or whatever the case may be. They could build in and use a little ingenuity to say, hey, we are going to give you value added services, and in return, we collect 3% of all the HBD that's on our platform. But over time, that could be a major funding mechanism for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the creative way people can imagine. You just deposit a coin that's stable and you get all these perks. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to deposit this one and not the other one. Because most people aren't even going to understand the inflation. They're not going to understand any of this stuff. They're just going to be like, hey, I'm here to play some games. What is this token offering? It's offering all kinds of, giving me kickback. Because they're not going to look at it interest. They're going to be like, oh, this is offering me kickbacks if I hold this token, and I'll get free entries into certain free rolls and tournaments and all this stuff. And that's the way the platforms can capitalize and earn some of that interest for themselves. Hell, they could even keep all of it and just offer, premium access and all these things just for holding a stable coin. What do you do? What do you get when you put your dollars in there? You don't get anything. But if you put this coin in, this version of $1 in, you get premium access, all kinds of free rolls. And if they had a couple of million deposited doing that, they're earning a nice stable income every year, even at 10%. So
am I correct in my thinking? And logic just tells me this. You kind of touched upon it, but I wanted to expand upon it. I would imagine the view is probably across gamers in general, but I would figure that if you went to a platform and you could deposit Bitcoin, you don't want to deposit, let's say, $5,000 in Bitcoin. And so you open up your account, you throw $5,000 worth of Bitcoin in, and you're busy for a couple of days with other things. So then you go back to gamble a couple of days later, and you open up your account and you realize you got 4,500 in there because the price of Bitcoin went down 10%. Now, naturally, the price of Bitcoin could go up 10%. You got 5,500 in there, so you're a happy camper. But I imagine you don't want to spec on that end of things. So you go and you say, okay, I'm going to put $5,000 in here into my gaming account on this particular platform, but I want it somewhat stable. So even if you pay in with Bitcoin, you want that to be quickly flipped to an HBD. So, when you come back 2 days later, you're going to have $5,000 to play with. Is my thinking correct in that? Or are gamers going to be playing with Litecoin and Bitcoin and these volatile tokens that can be bouncing all over the place?
No, they're going to want a stable source. You don't want to gamble on your bankroll. You have your bankroll, and a lot of gamblers, they go by a set of, I need 100 big blinds or 100 buy-ins. So it's very calculated. So you're definitely going to want stables.
So the fact that this no limit coin is going to, how should we say, promote HBD as the stable coin of choice on the platform, that could ultimately have a big impact, since anybody who's coming to that platform, no matter what they're bringing to the table, that's going to be converted almost instantly to a stable coin.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the great thing about getting HBD in as many merchants' hands as possible, because No Limit Coin, they're having a raise, they could blow up, and before you know it, we're on some viral platform. People are saying, "Oh, what's this HBD?" Other competitors are going to want to get involved because, like, "Oh, well, we don't want to come out of pocket. We need to get HBD as well, so we can offer the same." Because that's really what it is. You need one workhorse to show the world, and then they're like, "Well, we have to compete." And if we want to compete, we need these crypto stablecoins that actually offer yield just for holding them. Something you can't compete in the legacy fiat world. Like DraftKings can't compete with that. Sure, they could burn through millions of their VC funded money and offer all kinds of incentives, but that's not sustainable if their growth declines at all. So this is actually sustainable because it's out of No Limit Coin's hands. They don't have anything to do with HBD. They're just reaping all the benefits. So that's just one of the edges that these Web3 platforms, or companies that are coming in and building on top of Web3. That's what I like. Sure, you can have a centralized company behind a Web3 app, as long as it's not affecting the layer 1 coin voting. That's what my concern is. You can do whatever you want on the second layer. And I believe if you're a true Web3 app, your customer base needs to own their account. They need to own their crypto, and they need to utilize you more of as a skin, more of a, well, I want to plug my account and my money into this voluntarily because they offer a good product and service. Then you're a Web3 app, in my opinion. So I salute No Limit Coin. They're pretty OG, back 2016, actually. And he's been in the gaming industry for, I think, better part of a decade before he even got into crypto. So it's just really good to see somebody with a savvy mind that understands gaming get it right away. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is going to give me an edge over my competitors.
Yeah, and certainly doesn't hurt us on Hive, since that'll be potentially a lot of transactions. It'll be a destination for a lot of Hive, and ultimately somebody's going to have to open up some accounts.
Yep, ceramic accounts can't come quick enough, but I think Hive accounts are going to, one thing you can't get around, I think Hive accounts are going to be expensive. Not much you can do about it. If you want a premium, fully on-chain account, right now you can get it for 3 Hive. I don't know what that's going to cost in the future, but I know it's very valuable. So,
yeah, all that you can do. Ceramic accounts, that is something that I wanted to touch upon with Matt until he did his Houdini act for us. Why don't you, this goes back to Speak Network for those who aren't aware. What are Dan? What are ceramic accounts, and how are they going to be integrated in? And how does this apply to Hive? Because it's side chains. It's not a Hive account. It gives you some accessibility, but it doesn't give you total accessibility.
mm-hmm. So it's the very basic bring your own node package, very lightweight. Not going to take up much data at all. It's going to be built with an indexer that's offline or off-chain indexer. So what this does is you can have off-chain posting with an off-chain account, and then anyone like PeakD or HiveBlog can then import that indexer, and you can have off-chain and on-chain data showing up on the front ends. And this is for really a scaling mechanism for Hive, because I've seen this for a very long time. The LOL comments, the unnecessary bloat, as I look at it. It's like, these people want to communicate. They want to say LOL. They want to put their emoji, and why not? But we need to give them an off chain, something that, not going to bloat the blockchain too much. And that was the idea for ceramic accounts. Also the light and easy, sign up, no friction, no cost. You can plug your MetaMask, you can plug Bitcoin, any of these other blockchains into it, and seamlessly look at Hive as, so you have your ceramic account, and then you look at Hive as, oh, well, I want to post on chain. Well, that's Hive. But I can also interact with Ethereum and all these other blockchains if I want to if I so choose. But we really knew that Hive needs an off-chain counting system. People hoping that Hive accounts become cheaper, I think, are going to be in for a rude awakening. I think this is a problem that needs to be solved now, not later. So, we just had to build something open source that anyone can tap into from Hive. And, once you have a handful of apps using it, it becomes the go-to. The rest are sort of going to have to implement it, or their user base are going to bitch. And that's sort of the idea here, is just to give a quick, easy off-chain account. It's going to onboard MetaMask users, going to onboard all of the Web 2.5 users, so to speak, make it super easy to absorb them, and then post on the Hive in an immutable way. So that's sort of the Ceramic account in a nutshell.
So if I'm following along, I post an article on Hive, and I do it using my Hive account. And so I post it on Hive. The article's on there. And John is viewing the article through PeakD. And if PeakD is utilizing this system, as John's going through the comment section, he is seeing, because PeakD is simultaneously pulling from Hive and it's pulling from your sidechain. So as John's going through the comment section, if I'm understanding it properly, he may see a comment by They Call Me Dan that was posted through Hive. Then he may see a comment from Fred that was posted, and that's actually resident on the sidechain, and it was posted using a MetaMask wallet. And then he may see something that was posted using just a Ceramic account. And am I understanding that properly? So John will see all of that through the PeakD interface, but the PeakD interface is actually pulling the data from two different sources. Am I following?
Exactly. As long as PeakD is running the indexer, all of those off-chain comments, and there's going to be on IPFS, will be visible through the front ends. Yeah. And that'll be cool, because some users will be like, hey, how come they're earning money and I'm not? And then they'll have to get we're going to refer to them as premium accounts, premium on-chain accounts. That's what Hive account is.
Yeah, I've heard you mentioned, and Matt has termed it Hive Lite accounts, if you will, with the Ceramic. It's kind of, you get this, you can log in, you can comment on Hive-based posts, but you're not on Hive. You're basically on IPFS, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, you're on the off-chain indexer system, which has the Ceramic accounts built in. So as long as you're an app running this indexer system, you get the entire package. And everyone else running this indexer package will get the same results. So if Hive Blog is running an indexer, so is PeakD. The same content from offline is going to show up on both equally. So it's just a matter of getting apps to run the indexer, which is incredibly light.
And I'm going to go out on a limb here, way far out on a limb, and hypothesize that 3Speak is probably going to run the indexer. Is that a safe bet?
Yes. We already have other. DBuzz is running one. They're going to be actually the premier. It's already up and running there. They're just testing it. But yeah, they'll be the first one to have this indexer system running with the light accounts. So excited to see that. And of course, it'll be on 3Speak. So that's two right there. I'm sure we'll get PeakD, Hive Blog, get a handful of others, and then before you know it, we'll have a standardized off, because that's the one thing. We've done guest accounts for a long time. Every app has, but these guest accounts are native to 3Speak, or these guest accounts are native to PeakD or whatnot, and they don't mesh across apps, and that's Web 2, not Web 3. So we need a standardized off-chain solution that anyone can tap into, and it shows up across all the front ends. And that was the goal with Ceramic accounts. But really, it's not just Ceramic accounts, it's the indexer system as a whole.
Now, and I guess I'm trying to figure out who's doing the development, because Ceramic isn't you guys. You're just incorporating Ceramic into your infrastructure. And you say DBuzz is in testing right now. How close would you guesstimate this is to be in a reality to rolling out?
So the lead dev is Voltec behind this. We actually forked the Ceramic code base to modify it to the. Well, at first we were working with them, but they didn't have. I wouldn't say a different vision, but they were focused on other things, and we had to. There were a few code changes that need to be done at the core level, so it's just easier to fork it. And, right now, it is, as far as I'm done, as far as I know, it's already completed. It's just being tested. So rollout is imminent. The ceramic indexer system is complete. It's just waiting to be displayed on dbuzz. But yeah, I would say we should be able to see it. Yeah, this month. Why not? I'm not the coder, obviously, so I don't want to put anybody's ass to the fire. But yeah, from my last understanding, it's ready to go.
I think that's one of the most powerful marketing tools Hive could ever have. Because what you said is bang on. People are going to start the conversation. How come this account is getting money? Bunny ears, right? How come this account is getting upvotes and this is worth real crypto? What? Why? How can I get in on that? And then the conversation just goes from there, and bang, there's your onboard. That's powerful as hell. So.
Yep, be able to onboard 1 million people overnight without stressing the chain, and these million people can then get their Hive account at their own leisure. But at least it's like if you're waiting outside of a club and you really want to get in, and it's raining outside, well, you're not going to have a long line for long. You need to make it comfortable for the wait, and that's what a ceramic account is. It makes it a comfortable wait because inevitably people are going to get a Hive account. That's at least what we envision.
Yeah, that's fun.
And this is very interesting if those listening follow along with this thought process. And there's another aspect to the Speak Network that we haven't touched upon, although you did mention it, and it pertains to Hive itself. But one thing we have, just like we were talking about HBD and merchants and it going in these different directions and different use cases, Hive, the token, powered up, gives people governance. So you can vote on witnesses. You can vote on proposals. Hive also powered up gives you influence over the reward pool because you get voting power, and anything you vote that helps to distribute the rewards out of the reward pool. But another thing Hive powered up, which we'll see how it changes with the next hard fork since that's coded in there. But one thing Hive gives you is accessibility to the blockchain. Hive Power gives you accessibility to the blockchain through resource credits, or actually through Mana. And there will be resource credit delegation coming up in the next hard fork, which will certainly help out a lot of these applications. But what you're describing there, number one, is it puts, like you said, if you sign up 1 million ceramic accounts and let's say, I don't know, 5% of them decide they want a Hive account, well, now you're looking at 50,000 Hive accounts that all require some amount of Hive power to engage in the blockchain. And the reason why people are getting a Hive account to begin with is they want to engage in the blockchain in some way, shape, or form, whether it's for the rewards or whether it's for the HBD, because that's another thing we mentioned. Any of these people on No Limit Coin who get HBD, they're going to need a little Hive power to be able to interact, because even though it's feeless, that is possible because of the Hive power. So now, and where I'm going with this is, everybody likes to look at the price and determine, well, that's a reflection on a project. Well, Hive right now is looking at a potential demand on it for the reasons I just mentioned. And so by you guys adding the ceramic accounts and basically onboarding people in a light manner, then taking a percentage of them, moving it over, is going to create some more demand for Hive. However, there's another piece of this puzzle that we haven't touched upon, and you guys really haven't mentioned on CTT in some period of time, but I think it's very important. Would you explain the SIP and how that potentially over the next, if this takes off, the Speak Network takes off over the next couple of years, how that could suck up a lot of the free Hive out there?
Yeah, the SIP is, in essence, trying to replace traditional venture capitalist funding. The idea is to lock all of the value instead of burning it, which a lot of other projects do. lock it into a DeFi pool where it then generates yield forever, and also while simultaneously adding liquidity to the underlying assets. So it makes the assets more liquid, and also gives fees, which generally go to, they'll say, oh, well, it'll go to token holders. I have Uniswap, for example. It's like, well, who are the token holders? Well, 70% are owned by the venture capitalists or pre-mined. And I'm like, oh, okay, so it goes to you guys. And then the trickle goes to the rest of the community. This essence was to be voted on, right? So it's not just directly going into your pockets. There's going to be a pool, a DAO, and then you vote on where the value is going to go. So it's just about creating a sustainable pool. Anything that goes in, if you buy a Larynx miner, if you buy default ad rights, these things, instead of going into any one person's pocket or going directly to token holders, they're going to go into a locked DeFi pool. Essentially, if you think of anyone who's done yield farming, they'll say, oh, you need LP tokens, so liquidity pool tokens. That's when you pair two tokens together into a pool, and then you put it into a DeFi pool where people could trade against it, and then you earn trading fees. That's the general gist. Here, 100% of those fees are going into a DAO where they'll be voted on, and the LP token itself will actually be burned, so it cannot be withdrawn. So you deposit it, and then the actual LP token, which just represents a way to withdraw the token, will then be sent to null. So there'll be no way for these tokens to ever be taken out. And yeah, I think if there's a lot of demand for a decentralized sidechain for storing videos, for off-chain data, for incentivization of infrastructure, and there's a lot of people buying miners, and there's a speculation run on Speak, you can definitely see large chunks of Hive being taken off the market. You say quote unquote forever. Of course, there can be a run on the liquidity pools, but that could go both ways. So just for the sake of argument, we'll say, it's locked away, taken off of the market. And the way we did it was for max pain. Max pain meaning, if there's speculation one day, well, there's an auction that day of Larynx miners. So it rides the waves. You're not going to miss any gap. If there's, you don't want to be off when the speculation hits. And that was the idea with, you've seen some of these ICOs raise massive amounts of money, mainly through the daily, yearly auction. You look at Hex or EOS, for example, some of the raise massive amounts of money through that daily auction. Well, we thought, why not just do that forever? Every day, have an auction. It resets every year. And it just goes on sucking up Hive every day, theoretically, for the rest of its life. And this is really to stress the point that you don't have to build sinks into the layer one. You can have Hive, it can be inflationary, and then you can build sinks on the layer twos. And if you're really wanting to make the layer one as robust as possible, it takes the idea to say, hey, we're going to bring a value back to Hive. So instead of it being the native token to, make a pre-mine, make ourselves rich, we want to reinforce the layer one, act as a sink, the same nature as Ragnarok. And there'll be a theme in every project I get going, in some form or fashion, take Hive off of the market forever. That's the ultimate goal here, to add as many sinks to Hive as possible. And you can do that through games, you can do that through side chains. The SIP I just see being a powerful magnet. It's designed to soak up all the value if it's valued. So the question is there value there? If there is, it's not going to leave anything on the table. It's not designed to.
Yeah, and I've heard you mention that, and you just did that, the proceeds, the fees generated will go into a DAO, which will be community voted on. But you've mentioned before that this actually could be brought back to Hive if everybody voted on it, and the fees could be used, for example, to pay the witnesses and have the inflation adjusted to go another direction if the community decided on that. So you actually could take the proceeds from this SIP and use the revenue generated for other purposes on base layer infrastructure or Speak network infrastructure, or even if everybody decided, how about sending that to a proportion of it to Hive power holders?
Yeah, inflation's sort of like the teat, right? It's the what brings life at the beginning. I don't. I think it's the fire starter. It gets things going, and then once you have a sustainable SIP that is not generated through inflation but actual fees, and it gets big enough, and you know that there's not going to be a rug pull or exit into liquidity. You know that liquidity is staying there. You now have sustainable models where you can say, hey, we can actually start to rely on this inflation because we know it's not going anywhere, and it's actually going to keep getting bigger and bigger the more popular the network gets. You can definitely replace the inflation nature of Hive, even cap it momentarily. I always like to have the switch. It's like a safety net. If for some reason something happens, you always have that inflation. You can print money, right? So that's very powerful. We don't want to eliminate that, but we do want to eliminate the need for it. It's always good to have a safety net. You don't want to need a safety net, but it's there just in case. And that's what I feel with the inflation. I definitely see one of the goals being this SIP becoming so powerful that it actually backs the witness structure through its fees, and then we can lower inflation on Hive. And then you can start looking at Hive as more of a store of value. As the inflation starts to get lower, now people are like, oh, wow, it's low inflation, if not capped at times. Digital real estate. I actually have, it's like farmland. I actually have resource credits that regenerate, and these things are valuable. So, yeah, that's the way I look at the SIP. It's basically to replace inflation-based, VC-based, anything that's reliant on either printing or centralized funding. That's what it's here to replace.
Well, and I think it's interesting, when we couple that with HBD, and really, I'm starting to get in my mind here, Hive kind of resembles, or Hive and other fungible tokens like it. They actually take on characteristics like stock. And when you think about it, if you look at the quote unquote, like you said earlier in the show, everybody owns Hive, but nobody owns Hive. I mean, it's you have stake, and as long as you're holding the token, it gives you a certain influence on chain. And if you get rid of your Hive power or you power down, you lose your influence. And so, with the Hive and with all these other tokens, there's some volatility. There's the up and down. Right now, in my opinion, they mirror the tech stocks, and when risk is off, they get crushed. When risk is on, they run. And you mentioned the inflation, and everybody looks at the inflation of Hive, and they automatically assume they take that over to HBD, but HBD serves a different purpose. And HBD, especially when you start tying it into payment systems and start tying it into collateralization systems and start tying it into different things, now you end up with the situation of the supply and demand for money. And where is the money equilibrium? And do you keep expanding the money supply to fund your growth? Because that's ultimately what funds growth. And that's where real wealth is generated, by creating games and applications and building wind farms and making electric vehicles and sneakers and all that stuff, products and services that are offered and delivered. Well, that takes money to generate that stuff. And I think one of the advantages that when people look, and we talked about Luna and UST, but that was venture capital money. When you look at the correlation between HBD and Hive, what you're saying is exactly correct, because ultimately, if there is a need for more Hive, then the conversion mechanism of HBD can create more Hive. If there is not the market demand or the market need for more Hive, then there's no need to create it out of the HBD that's in operation. So we always have the community figuring out the money equilibrium based upon supply and demand.
Yeah, I mean, having the risk on and risk off being a part of the same coin is very powerful, because when you go risk off on Hive, it pumps Hive. When you go risk on Hive, obviously it pumps Hive, right? Because HBD being held is locking Hive out of circulation. And, we saw that Luna proved that when, we went through a bear market and it hit all-time high after all-time high, because we were in a bear market and people wanted that UST. So in order to get UST, they had to buy Luna, and then they converted to UST, and now that Luna's off the market and the UST is just being hodled. So yeah, I mean, it's very powerful. Just need a little bit more liquidity from HBD. But I think that having our finger on the pulse, we obviously do as a community. We saw the opportunity, and it's incredibly powerful to be able to raise to 20% as quickly as we did. It just shows how efficient we were. So I think, we're our fingers on the pulse. We have a really great product. It's not going to take long before a few more no limit coins, a few more people come about saying, oh, what do we got over here? Actually a great time for stable coins because of the conditions. People are being more and more risk off right now. Just another great test for HBD. We got to really hold that peg as hardcore as possible. I know Leo Finance is doing great work trying to bring more liquidity to that. Yeah, I just think that we need to start building more and more products around HBD and get the desire for it up.
I would agree with you. I think that's really the focus. So we're not total Hive maxis and Hive fanboys here. What would you say if you had to point to some areas that are right now points of vulnerability, issues with Hive, areas that you're not real happy with? I know you and I kind of agree. One of the areas that I think deserves a lot of discussion is possibly somehow coming up with ways of directing more value to Hive power holders to incentivize people more to take their Hive and power it up instead of just the ability to curate and the ability to get your 2.85%, but maybe, adding different mechanisms elsewhere in the ecosystem that generates money, whether it be through an off-chain like the SIP or whatever. What are some of the things, if you had a quick checklist of things that when you look at Hive, you step back and say, man, this isn't right? Obviously, you guys are approaching the onboarding with the ceramic accounts, but what are some areas that you just feel are kind of lacking right now with Hive?
So I would say from a fundamental point of view, I really like it. If I'm to take a step back and just put my investor hat on and I'm trying to say, okay, what's the next 6 months looking like? Hive is very, very unattractive in terms of, okay, so I'm going to power it up. That's 3-month commitment. That's fucking insane. You can't unpower it out. I can't unstake for a fee. I'm literally trapped. So if we're just talking about Hive and powering up and staking it, which is ultimately what we want a lot of people being able to do that. Hive is very unfriendly to the investor and liquidity providers all around. Right? Most coins, we learned this from Justin's son, want low staking, so exchanges become validators and stake. That's how you get in cahoots with these liquidity providers. The exchanges are the liquidity providers. And we just said F you to them. And it's like, there's no way you're going to become a validator. So we're incredibly unattracted. That's why, you ask yourself, why aren't we on Coinbase? Why are we on all these things? Well, they look at us and it's like, oh, well, we can earn being a validator on these other chains, ETH and Cosmo, whatever, right? And earn validator fees. And, it's kind of like an income source. They don't distribute those to their customers. So if you're looking at Hive, it's like we are going to go the purest, most hardcore route. We are not going to bow to exchanges and make it easier for them. We're not going to make it easier for the whale VCs to get in and out. We're going to make you go uphill barefoot. Uphill, once you get there, it's very nice. It's what you would call the promised land, censorship resistance and all that good stuff. But I would say one of the hardest things is we have not made it easy for money to get into Hive. I wouldn't change that. Now, I think that's good. It's a good thing because I wouldn't want exchanges being our validators, and I wouldn't want VCs sloshing around and owning a large portion of the funds. But if you're talking about what is a negative, that can be conceived as a negative, and it is. It's a positive long term. It's a negative short term, and that's why I've always said that it's up to the community, because what happens is when distribution can get screwed in a bear market because people start selling. And then what you do is you usually have smart money accumulating. And smart money is very few people. And they're accumulating through all the bear market. Before you know it, they might have 10, 15% of the supply because people just keep selling. One of the things that protects Hive, so it's not really negative, is the proof of brain. Because we are constantly distributing these coins to new people. It's not just, you might have people selling and a few buyers, but you still have the offset. And coin distribution is the holy grail here. Once that's compromised, everything goes to shit. So I would say we've definitely taken the hard route in terms of getting VC funding. We're not on Coinbase. We aren't on any real big Western exchanges. So if that's a negative, it's a negative to some people. I would say that's one thing that's I've noticed. But yeah, other than that, if you're just talking about from a game theory point of view, because what I do is I always compare Hive versus the market. I'll compare Hive versus itself next, right? Because it's like, what's censorship resistance? Well, let's look around at what actually exists first, because theory is cool. You can write about it, but what's actually in practice that's going to work? And then you say, oh, well, Hive's obviously in a league of its own, completely different. You can talk for hours about why and debate that and, come out ahead. And then you start to say, okay, technologically it's different. The fast, feeless nature, layer twos. So we are very, very different in a very good way. But in order to get that way, we had to compromise short-term gains, right? And we've noticed that, right? You see Luna, you see somebody, Tron, all these coins that are in cahoots with the exchanges, they always seem to have liquidity, they always seem to have propped up market. And that's just the market makers of these exchanges, right? They want these coins to be high in price because they get validator fees. I mean, there's no if you want to know how the world runs, go look at the incentives. These exchanges earn money from being validators on these chains. The higher the coin is, the more money these exchanges get. If they have millions and millions and millions of people depositing on proof of stake networks, they're getting lots of money for that. And, that's one of their big business models. Yeah, trading fees, but, I wouldn't be surprised if they earned as much in validator rewards. So, it's a harsh reality out there, but what can we do? We could think of ways to maybe have an unstaking fee, going back to your point about making Hive Power more lucrative. Well, raise that APR. And one way to do that is, hey, if you want to get out early, you pay 10%, and that 10% goes back to the Hive Power holders. You get out instantly. If Hive pumps 200%, you're happy to take 10% off, and all the Hive Power holders are happy to take your 10%. That's a way to not rely on inflation. I'm a big fan of hidden fees. I think that if you can have a fee that's not a deal breaker, you have to have it and have it go back to the community. That's how you reduce inflation. That's how you become sustainable. So, I really believe that I've been a proponent of the unstaking fee for a very long time. I think over 2 or 3 years now. I think when I made my first post about it, I'm still a fan of it. So I know Blocktrades and a couple of other people have been talking about it. Hallow, a couple of other members that were sort of on the fence before, really didn't give an opinion, or are starting to see some merit to it. So, maybe we'll see that get pushed through in the next hard fork. I think that would be pretty game changer for liquidity. But other than that, I don't, I'm not really a Hive maxi. I call it how it is. I own a lot of Ethereum, I own a lot of Bitcoin. So, I'm pretty harsh on Ethereum, even though I'm fudding my own bags. But I'm just, I call the same out on Hive, right? That's not something cool to say. Like, I'm not like me saying, oh, in the next 6 months, or next year, it might not, it might be a little rough liquidity wise for Hives because we're not on these Western exchanges. These are real eye openers, and these are real problems because liquidity is absolutely king. So I'm not quiet about these things. I want to bring them to the forefront so people understand that we do have real problems. They're self-inflicted for good reason. There's no, if you chase perfection, you'll end up getting hell because everything has a negative. So if we want to be censorship resistance, these are the problems that come along with it. But I've always said I look at Hive as a life raft or a boat, and it's like, okay, there's about to be an earthquake. No one knows when the earthquake's going to come. It could come a week, come a month, come a year. But do I want to risk going out and having a latte or having a good time? The boat will still be there. I'll come back. Or do I want to sit my ass on this boat because I know what the fuck's coming and not move And that's how I've always felt with Hive. I always felt like I would never get out for short-term gains because you never know when one big site's going to say, "Hey, we're implementing Hive accounts. Welcome to Web3," and then the whole world awakens. I've always equated to it's a soccer ball in a crowded room, and we're just waiting for one kick, and it's so close. There's so many people wanting to recreate Hive, wanting to do this, wanting to do that. It just takes one just actually saying, "Hey, what's this?" And then everyone's like, "Holy shit, what is that?" So that's, it might be a little bit rough in the short term, as it has been. I said this 6 months ago, and I think I said it 6 months ago before that. The recipe isn't there for short-term liquidity, but we have Hail Marys left and right. It's just a matter of time before people actually understand it. And then people will say, "Hey, we'll be on a Coinbase. We'll be on these Western exchanges." And then once that happens, we took the long route. We didn't take the shortcuts, and we still got the same benefit. And we retained our censorship resistance while doing it. So if we can do that, that's going to be a very beautiful thing. But we can't control what these Web 2 exchanges are going to do because they really do control the liquidity.
Task, I've got the headline for this podcast. Ready for this? Holy shit, what was that? I love it. Because that's what I think too. I think that's what's going to happen. It's going to be one of those things. It's going to be a big site that adds it and says, "Hey, we got Hive accounts," and then it's going to be that reaction. Holy shit, what was that? And what is that? And how do I get involved in it? And
I think one of the things, Dan, that strikes me is Hive is very slow going forward, and I think that's by design because we have so many central players. You mentioned block trades being one of them. These guys are very security conscious, and like you said, the pushback. A big topic of discussion has been the power down window, and block trades. I know for certain has been very emphatic that, hey, listen, this is a security mechanism, and 13 weeks may seem like a long time, and it is, but it protects the chain. And you even look at how, you said we moved up to 20%, and it's pretty impressive how we did it. But think about it. It took us a year to get there because we started at 0, then we went to 3, then we went to 7, then we went to, I think, 10, then 12, now to 20%. So it's not like we dive into the deep end of the pool by pulling off our clothes and just jumping in naked. We are very methodical, which that in a lot of ways can slow the growth, can slow the process, can make life a little bit more difficult and be frustrating to a lot of people. But I think you're right. Ultimately, we get to the same place. It may take us a little longer, but that's going to protect us from having the UST scenario where all of a sudden they realize, hey, what we're doing here isn't sustainable. We are so methodical that, and I've used this with HBD. I've written a number of articles because I've sat there and mapped it out. And to get to 1 billion tokens at our present number of HBD that's free floating, it's going to take us 20 years just to get to 1 billion tokens. That's methodical in the stablecoin world. And yeah, liquidity is going to be an issue, but we're not rushing anything. It's like, okay, yes, liquidity is an issue. It's a cap. It's holding us, our growth. It's slowing us down, but so be it, because we know we're not going to get to a point 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now where this whole thing blows up because we do something stupid.
Yeah, agreed. You can't rush it. And just another point, we aren't even on the DEXs either. So we've definitely it's an honor to survive, not only survive, thrive, and host all the ecosystem that we have and come all of this way. And it seems like the industry has been the current against us, right? We haven't really been getting too much help from outside. It's not like a Coinbase is like, oh, a community fork. You think they'd be all on that. But it's a good thing, right? Because it's like we didn't grow up with any handouts. We've had to get it from the bottom, and we had to scrap and claw for everything we have. And everything you give us is like, giving us a win to our sales. It's like, we didn't need that, but we're sure as hell going to utilize it, and we're going to use it as much as we possibly can. So, yeah, I mean, you forced me to say a negative. I would say that would be the one. Outside of that, I really lay down to the consensus of the community. Like I said, I've wanted the instant power down. But you don't hear me being salty about it, because if there's not enough for it, then I'm wrong. I wasn't right. And if I am right, then eventually it's going to come up, and I'm not concerned with that as long as I say my piece. And that's how I feel. You have to really humble yourself. It's a completely different world than Web 2. You have to state your piece, and then, really have some humility to the community and see if they vibe with it, and see if it's something that wants to happen or not. So that's what I love about Web3, though. I love the collaboration and getting there together. Because if I ever get the answer, I'm a little scared. Am I right? Am I wrong? Where's the debate? Where's my blind spot? I don't know everything. So you feel much better when you get there as consensus, and it's been vigorously debated. And as you said, you move slow, but when you do need to move, you're capable of moving fast. But these fast decisions came from years of deliberate paying attention, research, focus, grind.
Well, it's amazing how, I've been writing, I don't know how long about HBD, and it's you got to drop the ideas, and it's continual article after article after article, discussion after discussion. And, I've been talking about the time locked vaults, if you will, in the savings for HBD for a while now. And it looks like not this coming hard fork, but the next one, it might be coded. But Smooth was out there with HBD stabilizer. He had that idea years and years ago, and we got that about a year ago. And okay, that was a major breakthrough, and that kind of kicked everything off. And then a little APR, and that kicked everything off. And now we're getting more and more with HBD. So it's all part of that slow process. And like you said, you've been talking about the power down penalty, if you will, for years now. And well, some other people, including myself, are coming over to your side. I wasn't sold on it a few years ago, but you know what? I can see that point where, if you charge a 10-15% instant power down penalty, okay, and then you feed that back to the HP holders, well, what are they going to do with it? It's going to be staked because it's being paid out as HP. So the network's still protected.
Yeah, exactly. And exchanges still can't attack because they're going to have to burn 10-15% of their user funds, so they're not going to do that. So yeah, I think I like it, but more debate around it, and we'll see if it gets pushed through. If it does, it should dramatically increase our APR for Hive Power without inflation.
Excellent. Well, Dan, it's too bad we lost Matt. John, how about the peanut gallery? Do we have any questions, comments, points of interest that you bring up? People making fun of my bald head or anything like that?
Definitely making fun of your bald head. It was a good crowd,
Okay.
really good crowd on Twitter and Vim today. People stopping by YouTube. Sadly, Facebook just, Zuck.
Well, that's the other
doesn't,
thing, Dan. We have a badge. How many blockchains have been targeted by Twitter like Hive was? I mean, we may be the only one that actually was just put on the total ban list by Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, just from a nonchalant point of view, it looks like they promote scams, and they really hid the Hive, which was a threat to their technology, and then they just so happen to want to be creating something at the same time. But I don't know. I don't think anything. I haven't heard too many other crypto coins talking about being shadow banned. Hive is definitely shadow banned. It seems like the veils have come off though, so we'll see.
Any questions out there, John? Anything you want to point to? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, looks good. Harrington wants to know what would happen if someone created a game that looked like Ragnarok on a different blockchain other than Hive. I mean, I'm sure it could be done, but Hive is, I think, superior to build on. But then again, I'm very biased. So
yeah, it'd probably be centralized from a lot of points of view, especially if you have to deal with high gas fees. 3.3 million NFTs are no joke. So.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think of that. I mean, imagine even 3.3 million NFTs at 10 cents or 20 cents a pop on BSC. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
Yep,
you
there
mentioned, Dan, and you said other projects. Without going into any detail, do you have a couple other things on mind that are bouncing around? Some other things you're working on? You kind of hit us out of left field some months back with this Ragnarok thing. So, do you have some other things in the pipeline that you're starting to stir up?
Yeah, I always have the back burners being utilized. I don't know. I don't like to create too much hype. So when there's something that's more tangible, I definitely have many ideas that I want to go through. But right now, it's sort of like I have two children with Ragnarok and the Speak Network. I want to make sure that they are taken care of and launch in a stable way, and then are able to grow up on their own. So that's the goal right now. But yeah, once Ragnarok is really when we get to the point where it's NFT holders voting, then you'll hear probably very quickly another project that I've had on the back burner. So.
Exciting times, exciting times. John, you want to share anything that's bouncing around that you guys are working on, or are you still going to leave us all hanging?
Oh, I'm leaving you totally in the dark, man. You're wearing
right.
sunglasses, so that I can't say too much, or else you'll definitely need like super duper sunglasses, like next level sunglasses.
You
Dude,
guys
we're
are
always
getting,
building
you,
stuff.
you guys are
We're
getting
always-
as bad as Cal.
We're always building stuff. We just are very snail's pace is how we do things. Yes, because there's one guy who codes and then me who just dances on camera, and yeah. So there you go.
Well, Dan, thank you. And it's a shame that Matt had his internet connection. Maybe what we'll have to do, John, is we'll have to invite Matt back when he gets his internet connection situation straightened out, so he can give his view on everything Dan said and contradict Dan if he wants.
Where in the world is Starkers? You know?
Internet
like
in Pakistan or something.
and as a plug, 12:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Pacific ish. Every Thursday is the live CTT call. You can find it in the Three Speak Discord. We play a little Where's Waldo with the broadcast. Sometimes it's in Discord. Sometimes it's on Twitter. It depends on how much Matt wants to screw with me, I think, half the time. But, anyway, that's just me being the center of my own world. But certainly get into the Three Speak Discord, show up at 9:30 Pacific time, and it's a wonderful show. Dan, you guys are getting your own CTT groupies that we show up every week, and
CTT groupies.
Yeah, and John, unlike the CryptoManiac groupies, they're not like eligible like the Manson family for the Nut House. I mean, there are actually some sensible people there. I'm not one of them, but there are some.
So you're the leader of the groupies, then? That's what you're saying.
No, I'm not the leader because I'm just, I'm not right. We all know that, but there's some good guys there, and what girls.
After 30 plus episodes, we'll take any groupies. We're glad we still have people watching.
Please, it was requested, John, to please.
Yeah, I'll share the Three Speak.
Do you have it so they can sign up? And it's always a fun show. A lot of interesting topics. And by the way, also just one other point on CTT: if you find interesting articles or tweets or stuff relating to crypto that you want to talk about, there's a section where you can drop the links in there. And Matt does a pretty good job about going through them and then bringing it up during the broadcast. So it's a great way to learn about what's going on crypto, although they tend to talk a little bit about Hive once in a blue moon.
For sure. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming by. Appreciate your time as always. And of course, everything you guys do for this blockchain. It's awesome to have you here and always sharing your wisdom and insight with us. And speaking of two crazy kids that you're trying to raise, I got two right now that are like screaming in the background, and I'm trying to mute my mic every time they smash something on the door. It's exciting. It's a lot of fun.
I can see the passion. Yeah, I'm about to be there in August with number 2. So number two boys.
Oh man, congrats for that, dude. I got 2 boys too, and they're similar in age.
Yeah, he just learned about smashing glasses now, so he's needs to watch him now. He's a little freaking bulldozer. Yeah.
Mine's in the Navy, so I don't have to worry about it. Although she's armed, so that might be a bad thing. But
Yes. All right, man. Appreciate you, and thank you again for your time, and thanks to everyone for tuning in as well.
We
and thanks for
appreciate
Taz.
everybody taking their time out to follow us.
Yep. Cheers. Thanks.